Thank you very much, Godfrey. There was a recent landmark ruling of the Bahamas Court of Appeal that concerns road users, limitations on insurance coverage, and the risk created by uninsured drivers. Of course, this would have made headlines a couple of weeks ago with a very critical case. Here to speak to us more about that particular ruling and what it means are the attorneys who would have worked at that particular case. Very pleased to be joined this morning by Mrs. Nadia Wright and Mrs. Eugenia Butler from Providence Law. Ladies, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So what we've had here is a pivotal ruling, again, that was rendered by the Court of Appeal last Monday, which solidifies the law related to uninsured and unauthorized drivers. Can you tell us in a nutshell what that ruling was all about?
Yes, Simon. What had happened is that the Court of Appeal had overturned a ruling, significant one, in favor of Bahamas First, a client of Providence Law, which basically stated that where you have uninsured, unauthorized drivers, and these persons who would have been operating a motor vehicle are not named under the insurance policy, those persons cannot attach to an existing insurance policy. And so the court of the Supreme Court had made a ruling in favor of Monica and Betty Thompson, because this is the case of Bahamas First versus Monica and Betty Thompson. The Supreme Court had made a ruling that the judgment of $654,000 should attach to Bahamas First. But we had argued in the court below that it should not attach because the person who was operating the vehicle that collided into them was not an authorized or named driver on the insurance policy.
So what legal impact does this ruling have? And doesn't it refer to, I mean, obviously it refers to the recent Privy Council judgment, but what would have also impacted the Court of Appeal's judgment in this case?
Well, yes, Simon, the case has significant legal impact because it really solidifies the principle that you cannot benefit under provision or provisions that are not included in the insurance contract. And really that is a significant tenet of contract law because the parties are only bound by the provisions of the contract. Their only obligations are within the confines of the contract. And this particular case actually followed the ruling of a celebrated Privy Council case, and Eric Antonio and an insurance company of the Bahamas. So that case was very important in that the Privy Council, of course, which is the highest court that we adhere to, they particularly ruled that the courts will not hold insurers liable or impose liabilities on the insurers for provisions that are not covered in the insurance contract itself or that is not covered by legislation. So it's a significant ruling and it's precedent setting. So it's interesting to see the impact of this really in current law and really the changes that we need to make to ensure that drivers know the significance, how important it is to be properly covered, to be on the road.
Probably means there also has to be changes, as you mentioned, in the actual contracts themselves that are being written, I would imagine so.
Well, carrying on from that, in the insurance contract themselves, what could happen is that persons, and this means higher premiums, if people want to have any driver driving and operating their vehicle, they would have to pay for that. But you know, in our country, people be like, okay, Tom could have the car, and he's not. Only Sue and John are on the contract. So if Tom takes the car, it's literally an uninsured vehicle. If Tom gets in an accident with somebody, it means that there is no coverage for that person.
Well, in your opinion then, is the Bahamas ready for what you would call a motor insurance bureau? I believe Dame Anita Allen
that's
spoke
right.
about this,
Dame Anita Allen had prefaced in her ruling that there ought to be a motor insurance bureau. Now, in thinking about that, it is something that I opine the Bahamas is not currently ready for because the cost of living in our country, as you know, Simon, is significantly high. We are dealing with that. And on top of that, it means that persons who are responsible drivers would have to bear higher insurance premiums for this fund to cover for those unauthorized, irresponsible road users.
Well, if that's the case, could you then suggest some mechanisms that could be instituted to protect, particularly innocent parties, against the uninsured and the unauthorized?
Yes. Well, first, let me say that the police force is doing a stellar job in really policing our streets and ensuring that, or minimizing road traffic violations by conducting various roadblocks. But in addition to that, we opine that perhaps maybe the government can look into setting aside the necessary funding to put in place proper technology that would give police officers access to the road traffic system that would allow them to really run a license plate during their roadblocks to check to see if a driver has proper coverage to be on the road and to ensure that they are in good standing. And not only the driver of the vehicle, but also the owner of the vehicle, because it's commonplace in the Bahamas to you don't necessarily have to own the vehicle, but you're on the road, you're driving, and people's lives are at stake. So that's the first thing I would say. And secondly, awareness and really education is so important. And perhaps maybe, the government can partner with the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas and even insurance companies in general to really make people aware through advertisement of the significance of being covered, having the proper insurance to be on the road. For instance, people need to know that if you're a mechanic, you need to have the proper insurance coverage to be on the road. Perhaps maybe suppose you're test driving a vehicle and you get into an accident, it could you could get yourself into significant liability.
Which happened in the same Betty.
Exactly. And so
Betty Thompson case.
These things are so commonplace and people take it for granted. So we really need to make our people aware of the significance of being properly covered by insurance.
Well, listen, there's just so many more questions, not just on this particular case, but in general. We're going to have you back real soon. Listen, thank you very much for joining us again on Bahamas at Sunrise. You can let those know that I was well pleased this morning.
I will.
You're watching Bahamas at Sunrise. We've been with Providence Law.